Hey y'all! I'm sorry I had to do it. Today I'm going to show you how to make cowboy boots for your stuffed animal. This was requested by quite a few people, so let's get started. First of all, I painted my nails cow print just for this occasion, so I hope you all appreciate it. But the first thing you need to make this is some tan felt, and it's best if you can find the thicker version, but I could only find the normal kind, so to make this stiffer, I'm going to brush this with some liquid school glue. And I'm going to need a little bit more than half of this sheet, so I'm just painting over that section. And you do want a pretty thick layer of this glue. After that, I need to set it aside to dry, and while that dries, I'm going to work on the frame of the boot. So I'm just taking the boot patterns I made and tracing them onto some thin cardboard. These will be linked in the description box, of course. And I need one more piece for this that I didn't make a template for, but it's just a long, thin rectangle. It's probably about a little more than 1/4 inch wide and 12 inches long. After cutting out all those pieces, I can start assembling this. So now I'm going to take that long strip and start bending it, because next I'm going to be taping this around the sole of the boot. You can use glue for this, but I just find tape is easier. I just put it in about 4 or 5 spots at first, and once it's all the way around, I can start filling in the openings. I used the same process in my how to make sneakers for a stuffed animal video, so if you haven't seen that, I'll link it down below. It's definitely more of an everyday shoe. After closing that up, I can take this last piece and start curving it, because this is going to go at the front of the boot. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but I want the toe of the boot to be pretty pointy, so I'm going to put this at the pointier end. And at first I taped it on the inside like how I did for the sneakers, but I later took this out and attached this on the outside since it just was easier to put the felt on that way. And you want to put this on kind of at an angle so it looks kind of like the side of a shoe. Here is what it looked like once I moved it to the outside. Now that is it for the frame, so I can get back to the felt. So this is one I made last night, that's why it's already dry. And I added the glue to make it stiffer just so the sides could stand up a little bit more since cowboy boots are a little bit tall. Now I can grab the patterns I made for this, and it's going to lay like this shorter piece on top of the bigger one. And this time I cut both of them out of this stiffer felt, but I found that this thinner piece could actually be cut out of just normal felt. So that's what I did for the second boot I made. It is best for this thicker piece though to be cut out of the stiff felt. And this last piece I need is for the bootstraps, and there's 2 per boot, so I'm going to cut out 2 at once by folding over the felt first. And these are going to fold over the sides of the boots like this. Now I'm going to take those 2 bigger pieces and flip it to the softer side of the felt, so the part that wasn't brushed with glue. And I'm lining up the bottom edges, and now I'm going to sew along this bottom curve with some dark brown thread so it definitely shows up on the felt. But instead of sewing, you could also glue this on and then add the stitching detail later. Here is what it looked like when it was done. It was a little harder than I thought to maneuver around this curve, so there are a few places where I had to go over a few times so it's darker, but this was good enough for me. So now I'm going to flip it over and trim off that back layer of felt, and that's just so it's not too thick at the bottom. Next, I'm going to add some stitching details, and it's not really stitching because I'm going to be painting these on, but if you have a fancy sewing machine, you might be able to do some designs, or you could do it by hand. But I find painting it on is so much easier and looks pretty good. So I've just mixed up some brown paint with fabric medium, I think that's what it's called. It basically just turns acrylic paint into fabric paint, but I could have just used acrylic paint because I'm not going to put this in the wash or anything. Anyways, I'm just painting a design right on the toe, and this and the one I did on the side are both inspired by some cowboy boot designs I saw online. I used a really thin paintbrush to do this and tried to make little dashed lines to form the design, but I think a toothpick would also work well. You could copy the same ones I do or make up your own, but I will admit this one I'm doing on the side is a little bit tricky. And I'm only painting it on one side, and that's the side that's going to be facing outward. After that dries, I'm going to take the buckle pieces and fold it around one of those bumps, and then I can pin it on and do the same for the other side. And now I'm going to sew these on by doing a straight stitch along this entire top edge, which is going to give me more stitch detailing at the top, which is what I want. This one on the left moved a little bit as I was sewing, so it's not exactly like the other one, but once this is formed in the boot shape, they won't be right next to each other, so you won't really notice. Now to attach this to the boot frame, I basically need to line up the center of the felt with the toe of the boot and glue that front part onto the cardboard toe piece. And I'm going to be using hot glue for this since it'll dry really fast, but you could always use liquid glue and just really hold it on there for a bit while it dries. I'm sorry that I'm kind of out of frame while I'm doing this, but I basically just applied glue starting from the bottom of the frame, and from there I just kind of tucked in more glue around the rest. The toe part is definitely the hardest part because the felt won't really want to bend this way, so there might be slight wrinkles or folds, so just try your best to get the most surface area of the felt stuck to the frame. The rest should be pretty easy though. I'm just gluing it on till the ends reach the back. Mine ended up meeting up in the back exactly, but I'm going to extend the pattern a little bit to account for any differences in the frame sizes, so you might have extra to cut off. And I stopped gluing this around where that first section ended. As you can see, I decided to leave the rest open so the sides kind of overlapped in the back and I could tighten it to my stuffed animal's leg. You can use Velcro for this, but an easier way to do it is to cut a hole in each side and then put a string through it and tie it that way. But I will admit this method didn't allow me to tighten it too much in the back, so Velcro will definitely give you a tighter fit. Now the last thing to do is add a foam base to this, and this is optional, but I feel like it just makes it look more realistic. And this is really thick foam, it's about 1/4 of an inch, but you can use any other kind of foam or just use cardboard or something. So I'm tracing this sole pattern from before and can cut it out. And cutting this out can be kind of tricky because it's a smooth oval, but as you're going around with each cut, it's kind of creating straight lines and angles within the foam. So it was looking a little bit rough for my first attempt, and I tried to clean it up the best I could, but eventually redid it. And I found the key was to cut more confidently, like do a few big cuts instead of a bunch of tiny ones, and that helped the sides look a little bit smoother. This first one though, I ended up cutting in half because I was initially going to make a heel for this boot, but this foam was really thick, so I found when stacking them together, the heel was a little bit too tall for me, and I preferred a flatter base so the stuffed animal could stand up on their own, and if you saw the intro, you could tell that it worked. Now after gluing that on, this first boot is done. After making one more, this pair of cowboy boots is done, and just one thing to note is I made sure to put the design on the opposite side, so when you stand them next to each other, they should be facing out. And one more thing I ended up doing to that first boot I made was cutting that hole in the back a little bit further from that edge, so I'd hopefully be able to tie the back tighter. But in the end, I wasn't able to get it too tight in the back, so the boots pretty much just go straight up the leg, but they don't fall off or anything because the bottom part is really fitted to the foot. Now it is time to try these on, and this is the best outfit I could come up with, but unfortunately it's not any of the stuff I've made, so both the shirt and pants are pieces I've gotten from Build-A-Bear. And I may have forgotten to mention that these patterns are sized for Build-A-Bear sized stuffed animals, but they won't necessarily fit all Build-A-Bears because I know the Build-A-Bear frogs have pretty big webbed feet, so you may just have to trace their foot to get a pattern for that. After lacing these up in the back, these are ready to go. Ready to go do what? I'm not sure. Maybe ride some horses or something? Or it could honestly be a cowboy Halloween costume. Speaking of Halloween costumes, make sure to comment down below what you want to see in my next costume video. Last year for Halloween, I think I did about 6, and that was a little too much, so I probably won't do as many this year, but if I notice a certain costume is getting a lot of requests, I'll definitely do it. I really hope you enjoyed this video, especially those who are requesting this. I hope you try it out. Oh, and I just remembered to do the stand test, and it looks like she passed, so that's good. It would be great if you could give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Bye! And this was inspired from some cowboy boots. And this was inspired by some cowboy boots. But this probably won't fit all Build-A-Bears though, because I know the Build-A-Bear frogs have pretty big webbed feet.